Welcome to the Explainer. Now listen, if you have been anywhere near the fantasy romance reading community lately, you know there is literally one massive 576-page sequel absolutely dominating the conversation right now. I mean, it is everywhere. We are talking, of course, about Sarah A. Parker's highly anticipated 2026 release, The Ballad of Falling Dragons. It's the follow-up to the viral sensation When the Moon Hatched, and let me just tell you right out of the gate, it is an epic that takes the whole Dragon Rider subgenre and elevates it to emotionally devastating new heights. But as many of you have already dipped your toes in know all too well, this world is expansive. It is a high fantasy landscape just dripping with ancient magic, incredibly heavy crowns, and a love story that literally blazes through the ages. And honestly, because the world building is so breathtakingly massive, it can also feel a bit, well, overwhelming. It's a lot to take in. So today, we are going to break the whole thing down together and make sense of it all. Here is our game plan for today to organize all this beautiful chaos. We'll start with the return of this viral sequel. Then decode the dense geography of the three kingdoms. After that, we'll unpack the magic, the gods, and the dragons. Finally, we'll dive into the emotional heart of the story, weigh the highs and lows, and figure out if it is truly worth all the hype. Okay, let's dive right into Section 1. A viral sequel returns in Moonfall Book 2. The anticipation following the first book, When the Moon Hatched, was nothing short of electric. I mean, think about it. That first book literally hatched a heroine out of a fallen moon and dropped her straight into a world filled with dragon clans and deep, deep political rot. Readers have been waiting over a year to see what happens to Raeve and Kaan Vaegar, the fierce warrior king of the burn. But here's the catch. Parker doesn't hold your hand. She drops you right back into a world with its own completely unique time system, intricate geography, and complex magic. Entering the sequel can feel like a really daunting task. And honestly, if you feel that way, you are absolutely not alone. Just look at this real feedback from a dedicated reader over on the Romantese subreddit. They pointed out how tough it can be to visualize everything without fan art to guide you. They were asking things like, what even is the difference between a moon plume and a saber scythe? Is it just big dragons versus small ones? And you know what? It's a completely valid frustration. When an author creates a world this unbelievably rich, complete with glossaries full of terms like aurora cycles and miskan, it's super easy to feel a bit lost in the dark. But don't worry, we are going to shed some light on all of it right now. Which brings us nicely to Section 2, the Three Kingdoms, focusing on geography and dragons. Let's ground ourselves in the physical world itself and demystify these complex borders and incredibly distinct dragon species so you never feel lost reading this again. Consider this your ultimate cheat sheet to the realm. You really have to understand that the environment here directly shapes the beasts, and the beasts, in turn, shape the politics. It's a huge interconnected ecosystem. So, up in the north, you have the Burn. It's ruled by Kaan Vaegar. It's incredibly hot, volcanic, very sunny, and it's home to the saber scythes. Now imagine massive, boxy dragons with thick, rust and black scales that are literally designed to withstand magma. They are essentially flying, heat-loving tanks. Then, moving to the middle, we have the Fade. This is a cold, snowy realm locked in this sort of forever golden hour lighting, ruled by Kadoric. Their dragons are the Molten Maws, and they are stunning. They are beautifully feathered and vibrant pinks and blues, and compared to the others, they are actually the easiest to bond with. And finally, way down in the south, you have the Shade, ruled by the cruel Tyroth. It is freezing and forever dark, lit only by these eerie aurora ribbons in the sky. This is where the moon plumes live. They have leathery, luminous white skin and these huge, black, glittery eyes. They are notoriously cunning and incredibly hard to bond with. So you can imagine, bringing a luminous moon plume up to the hot north or dragging a massive saber scythe down to the freezing south requires extreme care. The geography is basically destiny for these creatures. All right, with the map firmly in our minds, let's look at Part 3, Magic, Gods, and Dragons. We need to talk about the invisible forces governing these lands. Because the magic system in the Moonfall series, it isn't about waving wands or brewing potions. It's all about hearing the elemental songs of the 5 creators, or gods. Fae who hear these songs gain incredible powers. For instance, if you hear Ignos, you get fire magic. If you hear Claude, you get air. Boulder gives you ground, and so on. Now, most people are lucky to only hear one song. The fact that our protagonist, Raeve, can actually hear 2, that is extraordinary, and honestly, incredibly dangerous. But beyond those elemental songs, there are specific, highly specialized magical disciplines that really drive the plot forward. The first big one is Bloodlace. This is the terrifying ability to control blood. But more importantly for our story, it's used to magically test bloodlines. Think of it like a magical high-stakes DNA test. And this is a massive plot point. There's a character named Kaisari who is currently trapped.
and testing her blood is going to reveal that Kaan is her true father. The political ramifications of a secret like that getting out, absolutely world-shattering, which makes Bloodlace an incredibly dangerous tool if it falls into the wrong hands.
Then we have Mindweft. This is the ability to literally dig into someone's mind, extract truths, or forcefully hide their memories. And guys, this leads to one of the most heartbreaking reveals in the entire book. It involves Kaan's sister, Vaea. Through Mindweft, Vaea discovers that she is an orphan maker. It turns out that under her father's direct orders, she poisoned the ruling Navan family in their sleep. But the horror doesn't stop there. A Mindweft was used to violently strip away her compassion and bury those traumatic memories deep down. Also, she could just continue being a living weapon for her family. When her cruel brother, Tyreth, forces her to remember what she actually did, the despair she feels is so absolute, so overwhelming, that she literally begs a dragon to eat her. Just let that sink in. It is a stunningly dark, visceral moment that shows you just how invasive and devastating this kind of psychological magic can be. Finally, rounding out our magic crash course, we have the Aetherstone. This terrifying little object contains the actual essence of the supreme god Kalilis. Remember Kazari, the girl we mentioned earlier with the secret bloodline? Well, she is currently imprisoned in a filthy cell by the ruthless scavenger king Arkan, and the Aetherstone is physically fused to her brow as a diadem. If she even tries to remove it, it causes agonizing, unspeakable pain. Yet you have to admire Kazari's sheer resilience. While locked in the dark, she's literally grinding bone shards down into lockpicks and repeating a survival mantra to herself just to keep going. It really drives home the point that magic in this world isn't just powerful or cool, it exacts a severe, heavy physical and psychological toll on literally everyone who touches it. Okay, let's shift gears and take a breath as we move to Section 4, the heart of the story, and a love across lifetimes.
Because underneath all those heavy crowns, the intricate magic systems we just talked about, and the looming threat of these falling moons, there is a profoundly deep, beating, emotional core to this book. At the center of everything is the century-spanning, deeply, deeply complicated romance between Raeve and Kaan. Raeve is slowly, painfully reclaiming her forgotten past as Eloine Navan, and Kaan Vaegar is the man who has quite literally spent lifetimes waiting for her to remember. A review by That Love podcast perfectly captures the visceral feeling of reading this relationship. They described it as being like watching a supernova in slow motion, and that hits the nail on the head. You know the emotional explosion is coming. You can feel the pressure building up behind every single page, every shared glance, every agonizing miscommunication between two people who loved each other across lifetimes and are still just trying to figure out how to do it in the here and now.
The themes Sarah A. Parker tackles here are incredibly mature and heavy. Let's break these down. First, Raeve isn't just out there fighting physical enemies with swords. She is fighting a terrifying internal battle with amnesia. She's navigating a completely fractured identity. Who is she really if she can't even remember the woman Kaan originally fell in love with? It's a huge existential crisis. Then there's the concept of dragon soul bonding. The telepathic connection between a rider and their dragon in this world is used as this beautiful, terrifying metaphor for total vulnerability. We get to see Raeve build this feral, hard-won bond with her dragon Lyri, and it requires absolute terrifying honesty from her. We also see characters processing immense grief and the weight of ancestral sins, paying for the crimes of their fathers. And perhaps most uniquely for this specific genre, motherhood is portrayed not as a sideline trait, but as a raw, devastating force. It is treated as equal to any war or act of vengeance we see on the battlefield, which is just so refreshing and powerful to read. All of this intense emotional tension, all that slow-motion supernova buildup, finally culminates in an absolutely unforgettable scene at the Bothame execution lake. Picture this. Kaan and his allies are trapped. An Ante, which is a terrifying nightmare creature that literally gorges on souls, is approaching them in the water. Raeve, whose internal coping mechanism for her trauma has always been visualized as an icy, unfeeling lake, uses her magic to part the actual physical water of the lake, creating an escape route for them. But to secure it, to really make it work, she has to finally stop running from her own feelings. Bleeding from her eyes and ears from the sheer, overwhelming force of her magic, she literally pins Kaan to a wall with a dragon scale blade and verbally claims him right to the monster. She stares this soul-eating nightmare down and with fierce, quiet intensity just says, "He's mine." Guys, it's the moment she actively chooses life, vulnerability, and love over hiding in the ice. It is an absolute masterclass in character payoff. Just chills. So all that being said, how does the book actually hold up as an overall reading experience? Let's take a critical look in Part 5, the highs and lows. Because look, with any massive 576-page middle book in a sprawling fantasy trilogy, You are inevitably going to have some soaring triumphs, and you're going to hit a few stumbling blocks. Let's impartially report on what critics and fans are actually saying out there. Looking at the highs first, readers are universally praising Sarah A. Parker's lyrical, poetic prose. It's lush, it's highly metaphorical, and it's just breathtaking to read. The world building, as we've seen, is incredibly expansive. The character depth is profound, and the chemistry between Raeve and Kaan is just undeniable. You're rooting for them the whole time. However, the lows are just as noticeable for a lot of readers. Reviewers frequently point out a sluggish pacing in the early chapters, and this is largely due to that overwhelming density of the lore we talked about. If you haven't read the first book super recently, you will absolutely be flipping to the back glossary constantly just to keep up. Furthermore, the inclusion of multiple point of view characters occasionally stalls the forward momentum of that main romance. And finally, fair warning, the book leaves quite a few plates spinning with a cliffhanger that will leave you absolutely desperate for book 3. We've explored the world, we've unpacked the magic, we've felt the heartbreak, and we've looked at the critiques, which leads us to our final section. Is it worth the hype? Let's get to the final verdict. The consensus across reviewers, book blogs, and the massive fan communities sits at a very, very strong 4.5 out of 5 stars. Critics describe it as messy in the way that middle books so often are, trying to bridge the beginning and the end, but it's gorgeous in a way that only Sarah A. Parker can write. Listen, it is not an airtight, breezy beach read. It just isn't. It demands your patience, it demands your full attention, and it definitely demands your emotional bandwidth. But for readers who are willing to sink deeply into the complex lore and ride out that slower early pacing, it is a high-effort, high-reward masterpiece. It completely solidifies its place right at the very top of the romantasy genre. So what do you think? Are you prepared to navigate the deadly politics of the burn, the fade, and the shade? Are you ready to face down a soul-eating Anthara, untangle the heartbreak of forgotten memories, and witness a love story that defies the very falling of the moons? Well, armed with this roadmap we've gone through today, you are now completely ready to pick up the book and experience all this magic for yourself. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll